Welcome to the RealTrending podcast, where we speak to the brightest minds in real estate about leadership, business growth, trends, and strategy. I'm your host, Tracey Velt, Senior Director of Data and Content for HousingWire and RealTrends. Today, I'd like to welcome Dan Elsea, President of Real Estate One family of companies in Michigan. Dan leads the company along with his brother, Stuart. Real Estate One was founded by his grandfather in 1929, and the company has grown to number 20 by transaction size in the 2022 RealTrends 500 brokerage rankings. The 2023 brokerage rankings will be out in March. So welcome, Dan.
Great to be on. Thanks, Tracey.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining the podcast. We're just going to get right into it. Obviously, the real estate market's evolving, and I feel like the pace of change is faster than ever. So talk to me a little bit about how you're preparing your brokerage for tomorrow.
Well, I think probably we've been through a lot of tomorrows over the years, in our fourth generation of tomorrows. So you get sort of a cadence, not that I'm 90 years old or Stuart's 90 years old, but we get to a cadence of what to do. And I think, so you learn what's worked over the years, and probably a lot of things. Our structures of being very flexible is probably what's kept us going. Most of our competitors, obviously, where it started, my grandfather started 90 years ago, aren't here anymore. Most that were in the business when my brother and I started aren't here anymore. So I think that flexibility, that willingness to experiment. When you get together with a lot of brokers, usually some conversation comes up where they're complaining about the new competitors, the new disruption, and how evil and those guys won't work. We tend to look at it the other way, saying, well, what ideas, what things are coming, what new models are out there that might help us and let us evolve. So we obviously look very different than we did 90 years ago. We look very different than we did 10 years ago. So we probably always have at least 3 or 4 experiments going on, whether it's agent compensation, whether it's services to consumer, something that we've always got different brands, different products going. So going forward, we'll continue to do that. I think there'll be a lot of consolidation going forward. There would have been years back with the margin consolidation in the brokerage world, brokers having less. There should have been a lot more consolidation, but the last 15 years of good real estate have sort of masked that. You could be inefficient and still kind of be okay. Now that the world has changed and we're in for probably 2 or 3 years of slow growth off of peak, the realization will come. And if you've got an office of 30 salespeople, 5,000 square feet, and your margins are 85% payout, you're going to have to do something, and you're not big enough to have title and mortgage. So that's an opportunity for us and for I think a lot of the regional players that are growing in the marketplace, whether they're within a brand or independent.
Yeah, I know Steve Murray has always said, pick your lane. Either you're going to be a small boutique brokerage or you're going to be big, but the people in the middle are the ones who are really going to struggle the most. So, and being flexible, it's really interesting. I love the approach that you take because it's true. I hear all the time about my challenges competing with all of these new models. And I always take the approach that competition is good. It forces you to be better. It forces you to innovate, and there's room for everyone in the market as well. So I love that.
Yeah, it can be painful sometimes when you're learning a competition, and particularly when you have an existing brokerage, an existing model. It always feels like you're trying to change oil while you're driving down the freeway. It's hard to make those changes, but I think we've always taken the approach that you have to be willing to throw out your existing business model. You have to be willing to do that, and that's hard to do. Have the guts to do that, but also the wisdom to know when to do it and how. But it's that willingness to do it that's hard to do. That's why I'm from Detroit. That's why the auto companies struggled for so long. They weren't willing to get out of their box, and that's why a lot of the franchises, the traditional franchises now, you see struggling because they're for finding ways to grow. Because it's once you've built a box, and that box was successful years ago, it's hard to get yourself out of it. And we try to avoid building boxes too much. So we operate under 4 or 5 different brands and at least as many different business models. So
Yeah, that's great. And I want to talk a little bit about the market because the shift seemed to come just so suddenly overnight. A lot of brokerage leaders kind of look at this as an opportunity to gain market share with local M&A and walkovers and that. In fact, I was talking to several brokers at NAR who were like, "Oh yeah, we're looking for those small producing brokers who have like a small team and they're struggling right now and they're going to walk over." So how is Real Estate One kind of taking advantage of this opportunity in this market?
We're doing the same thing. We teach our salespeople to pick up the phone and call their sphere and call their friends and find business. And so I'm doing the same thing. As a company, we're reaching out to the brokers that we know and seeing how they're doing. And just like last year, in that change year, we still had half of our realtors do better than the year before and half not. And I think that's true with the brokers as well. So as my conversations with my fellow brokers, half are doing the same or better, and half not. So we're just reaching out and asking, um, and we'll probably have. We had 4 mergers last year. We might do 4 to 5 or 6 this year as well, maybe more. And you have those walkovers. We're having a number of individual agents joining us, experienced agents. I think we had 3 or 4 $10 million agents join us last week. So that's changing, but that was the case of a couple of brokers that were folding. So I don't know that you see a lot of that, but we might, because even though this year is going to be a really good real estate year, it'll equate to 2014-15. It's still a big drop from peak. And if you set your expenses and your margins, again, we went through a lot of years of where the great sales hit poor margins. Most of our growth historically has come in markets like this, where we've had agents that join us from competitors that are looking for a broker that they're confident will survive the change, or at least have support for their growing their business. So traditionally that's been the case. We expect that probably be the case here too.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of brokerage firms and even the national franchises especially have slashed operating costs and did massive layoffs earlier than maybe in previous years. Especially the lessons learned from the Great Recession have stuck with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so taking
Yeah.
very early action. What are, kind of some of your lessons learned or best practices, that you could share for other brokers who are looking to expand right now?
Well, I think in this market, you mentioned the reductions. Certainly, there's that part of it as well, and it's whether it's a broker or an individual realtor, you have to look at being as efficient as you can. And certainly, over the last 3 years prior to mid-year last year, we were all guilty of running a lot of, mentioned experiments, running a lot of experiments and trying a lot of things that we can drop. So that's step one, and that's the low hanging fruit. The next piece, which this year most brokers will go through, are the hard decisions, and that is, if you're doing 25% fewer transactions, then you probably have more staff than you need, and those decisions are really hard and difficult, and that won't happen. You say the publicly traded companies were sort of did that early. The advantage that a lot of us that are private, we can hold longer, and we tend to do that just because we don't have that Wall Street pressure. So, and we also have learned a lesson that we learned prior, particularly in the pandemic shutdown, but even before, is that you can cut too much, and because the market will recover, and you can be caught without having the talent. So we try to be as creative as we can on how we can shift and use people in different ways and not have to do that. On the growth side, you don't save your way out of a recession. You grow your way out of a recession. Saving only gets you so far. But on the growth side, we've been focusing on heavy on education with our salespeople. We do a thing called Team at Two, which is an event about every other Tuesday, where we bring in speakers. We do our own stuff, panels. It's a virtual conversation. We started that back in the pandemic days and continued it. So that's just a way of continually provide information, education to our salespeople on how to react to the market. We have a research department. We have like a stock brokerage where they create market reports, information, can do custom reports for agents. So we drive as much information and communicate that to our salespeople. And that seems to make a difference in making sure they understand the market, can give good conversations with our clients, and more than anything else, give them confidence when they're talking to clients. So that's been a big piece of and being creative on our leveraging our platform for our affiliates, how we can use them to help create transactions for our salespeople, so that we can be creative in that piece too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've really noticed a renewed effort to boost agent productivity, especially right now, and really giving agents the dialogue to talk to buyers and sellers about the market, kind of get them off the fence and understand, what's really going on right now. And I've noticed like just a desperate need for that dialogue, for what do I say? How do I handle this situation? How do I talk about interest rates, and help these people to understand the market and then make the decision that is best for them, for the buyers and sellers. So I think the training is really important.
It is. We try to give them realistic examples and information as opposed to sort of scripts and dialogue things, because our salespeople feel a little comfortable, and we feel a little uncomfortable teaching them to say, well, every market's great. This is a great market. It's great for buyers. That crap. So we try to give them honest information and teach them to be counselors, not salespeople. And there are times when they're going to counsel a client, buyer, seller, not to sell right now, and they shouldn't be afraid to do that. And just that's what they hire us for, is to be counselors. So we focus on that type of education and training, is how to be. That's why we create our research group, and to do that, so we can give them information so they can do what they're hired to do.
Yeah, and I mean, really, that creates trust, and then it creates business down the road. Because if you're working with someone who, okay, well, they're not just trying to get me to sell, they're not just trying to force me out of my home or into a home, or they're giving me the facts and helping me, guide me to that decision. Because obviously real estate is all about relationships, the agent consumer relationship, the brokerage agent relationship. And so right now, just building those relationships and with your sphere, and building your sphere is really important.
Yeah, that's true.
So your company, obviously, you run the gamut on services that you offer, affiliated services, mortgage, title, relocation, property management. What are some of the things? It's so difficult to get high capture rates. Maybe title's a little easier than the others, but what are some of the things that you're doing to really boost your capture rates and educate agents on what's available, so they know what you have?
Yeah. Well, we've been doing it for a lot of years, so we have a book on what not to do. We read a long book on that. It's very thick, and a list of what to do too that works. So rather than focus too much on the not to do's, the to do's piece that we have done is we are relatively decentralized. And we have loan officers in most all branches. We have title people in the branches as well, and insurance. So we have a local touch for our salespeople. And we also tend to hire experienced people. So a loan officer that's experienced comes with a book of business, title people the same way, insurance. So they come with that credibility, and that helps in the capture rates as well. Little things like make sure we have fast turn on it all. But probably one thing that helped a lot over the last 5 years is we've been very focused on surveys and NPS scoring, and doing it internally and with our clients, and really driving hard with that. And I think that's made the last few years one of the things that made the biggest difference, because then we're able to really drill down to individual employees and individual actions, and really drive that service piece. So that's been a big help. The other is just leveraging it. We it sort of follows along that experiment side of things. We've been still are doing iBuying, power buying. So we combine the iBuyer, power buyer, bridge loan packaging together, so that our salespeople can move those sellers to buyers, that unstick the market. And it's still, even though our iBuyer product is a little different setup for margins than it was 2 years ago, it still is generating business and sales and still creating business. And again, still giving our realtors a consultative conversational point about here's an option for you. 90% of the time they don't take it, but we're able to have that conversation with them, and that's just leveraging that platform. So I think that's helped a lot, particularly on the mortgage side, in drawing our clients to us. They come to us right up front to get that information.
Hi, this is Tracey Velt, and I've got Mark Adams, Vice President of Real Estate for RealTrends, on the podcast today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the agent and team rankings coming up. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what our audience needs to know about qualifying for those rankings?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tracey. We're really excited to announce a rather large change in how we allow agents and teams to qualify for the rankings. And this will start in the current rankings period for 2023, which showcases production in calendar year 2022. So if you're an agent and you've had over 40 transaction sides or 16 million in volume, or a team with over 60 transaction sides or 24 million in volume, again, this is calendar year 2022 and excluding commercial, land, lot, lease, rentals, and referrals, we want you to submit your data today to participate in the industry's trusted rankings program with RealTrends and Tom Ferry.
Yes. So, it's important to note, again, like you said, only residential transactions are included in the rankings. And what is the deadline for that? And tell me a little bit about when they'll be released as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So RealTrends has partnered with the vast majority of the largest national brands in the country to receive qualifying agents and teams information automatically. So the best recommendation I have for the audience is, if you qualify, have a quick conversation with your broker to understand if they'll submit for you or if you need to submit your data yourself. If you would like to submit yourself, you can head over to realtrends.com and apply today. We're going to stop accepting submissions on April 14th, and we're planning on releasing the rankings mid-June. So again, have a quick conversation with your broker if you qualify, submit your data today, and we'd love to feature you on this year's rankings.
Great. Looking forward to the launch.
Thanks, Tracey.
So what about expanding? In this market, are you looking to expand any of the services that you offer? Or I've noticed that consumers want more, and that brokers are now kind of seeing that while they're agent centric, they have to be consumer focused heavily as well. Talk to me a little bit about that trend and what you're seeing out there, and if you're adjusting any of your services for that very reason.
We are. And yes, you're right. The consumer piece is where the world is headed. It was broker centric and then agent centric, and now it's concerned. And that's just a flow of information. That's how information is gone. So that's inevitable. So you do have to sort of package it, and that's really the reason that we have our affiliated pieces. All those pieces is to be able to package that together. So we do it a lot of simple ways. We'll do if a consumer uses our package of services, title, mortgage, insurance, all those pieces, then we provide them a benefit, lower cost. Just basically, it's a reward, thank you, but we're able to package that at a lower cost, and we think that will be in the future a significant thing, is being able to bundle at a lower cost. And we have some scale to be able to do that as well. We were now, other states are maybe a little further ahead than Michigan, but I think we were the first to actually do a true mortgage remote closing with no paper, no ink. So we're pushing that piece. We do ACH transfers automatically between the client and our escrows. So our salespeople don't handle escrow checks, EMDs, all of those things. It's done more efficiently. Our transaction platform talks to our title platform, talks to our mortgage platform. So those are the pieces that right now provide us more efficiency in the transaction management. I think over time will actually provide lower cost to the consumer as we become better at that process.
And now, have you built and I don't know this, I should know this, but do you have an in-house tech platform that you built, or are you working with outside vendors?
It's a little bit of both. Our core platform is a vendor, but we have our own pieces that we've plugged into it, so it's a little bit of both. But we use Zip TMS for our transaction platform. We have a vendor for our websites and our CRM and all that piece, and then we have the title pieces as well. So it's mainly vendored out, and what we do internally is we knit the pieces together. That's the piece that we add from our IT crew.
And what about property management? I know that a lot of brokers are really focused on property management right now because it's one of those kind of recession-proof businesses in a way. A lot of headache sometimes, but so talk to me a little bit about that. Are you expanding those portfolios or?
We have been, yes. Our property management piece has been expanding and doing well. I'm not sure how many doors we have now, but it's split between, since we have an operation in northern Michigan that's resort, it's split between that, the weekly resort, the VBRO and Airbnb business, and then the traditional, and then we have a big piece in Ann Arbor, which is where the University of Michigan is, where we manage the comings and goings of the professors and the doctors and their homes and things. So it's a very diverse group, but it has been growing, and it does seem to be that alternative cash flow. It isn't huge, but we have noticed that that we're an opportunity for our salespeople is that the weekly rentals, the Airbnbs and VBROs are getting squeezed a little bit. We have a lot more individual investors who have purchased those. They're individual people, not corporations and not large buyers, and they're suddenly seeing their occupancy drop rather dramatically. So that's an opportunity for us. We're managing those properties for them, and many of them are deciding to sell. So it's a source of business for us.
What are some overall trends that you're seeing in the real estate industry in general that, concerns, challenges, opportunities?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of conversations, little trends about whether the fee structure will change dramatically for realtors with the lawsuits, whether there'll be employees and all those things. None of those worry us too much because our industry is amazingly flexible, and it shifts pretty well. So we think the industry will shift accordingly. The core issue of consumers needing a professional to help facilitate a transaction won't change. The way that realtors provide that service, how they provide it, and to what degree they provide it will change. That'll evolve. It's evolved for the last 100 years. It'll evolve dramatically over the next few years. But the need for us in that transaction won't. So we'll adjust to that. So I think, as we talked earlier, there'll be some consolidation because we haven't yet adjusted to the new margins for how salespeople do business. And I think that brokers will need to provide. There'll be, as Steve had said, there'll be either sort of a broad-based brokerage or a limited boutique piece. The boutique pieces will tend to be at the higher end. They have to, for average sale price, to support that product. The broad-based will be broad-based, but we'll be doing it. We'll probably be providing a transaction fee type service, a split service, a full service of do-it-yourself for consumers. We'll be adding the financing pieces to it, whether it's some combination of what we've been experimenting with bridge loan, iBuyer, Power Buyer, all those pieces. So if you're able to provide all of those choices, then you'll have that palette. Because consumers, we all have unlimited choices now. The technology has afforded that. And that's new to our industry, to have realtors have choices between models that they can use, and consumers have choices. So you either pick your lane of one of those choices or you provide a palette. And we're providing that palette. We have that footprint to do that.
My second last question, really. But, the housing market is way different than last year. A lot of real estate agents are uncertain. So what advice do you have for agents to kind of reach that mindset of growth and opportunity and instead of that anxious worry about the next transaction?
Well, sometimes anxious worry is the fuel that causes action. So I'm not necessarily sure that's a bad thing. Even our top agents always say at the beginning of January they're worried they're ever going to have another sale, and they did $200 million last year, and they still have that fear. So that's a healthy thing, I think. But channeling that to a positive way, I think that there isn't there probably isn't anything that is new and earth-shattering and different in advice now than before. You need to stay very close to your sphere. That's what most of our salespeople, and even across the country, they live and die by the people they know. And the thing to keep in mind, it's subtle, but you got to remember that thousands, tens of hundreds of thousands of buyers, and they're also sellers, most of them as buyers, are pulled and sat on the fence because of what happened the last year market, prices and interest rates. And you have to make sure you don't forget about them. Stay very close to them. It may take them 2 or 3 years to get back in the market, but they will. So the good news about the contraction that we've gone through is we didn't lose any buyers or sellers in this 25, 30% drop. They're just on the fence. So that advice is stay very close to them and also get very, very good. Most realtors didn't become a realtor because they enjoyed math, but but this is one time where math makes a difference. You have to get in and understand the statistics, understand the market, give your agents that information, whether you create it yourself or buy it. Keeping current matters and those types of things. Inman and others, you guys provide great stuff, Altos. And so get that information out to your clients. And the biggest thing, particularly for realtors that haven't dipped their toes into how to communicate in today's world, that's advice, is if you're not in some form communicating either through, as we're doing here, through video, through even basic texting and email and Instagram and all of those pieces, the conversational piece online. If you're still relying on mail and others, snail mail, then you have to make that shift. And that's not new advice, and none of it's new. It's just that the urgency to act is the biggest difference now. Those that take the time, they have more time. You have 20% more time if sales are off. So invest that in relationships and it'll come back to you.
Yeah, great advice. My last question is just what's next for Real Estate One? What can we look for in the next year?
The next year, I think as we've been talking all along, we'll look for opportunities for growth, for either acquisitions or we do bring a lot of new people in the business. We've got the largest school in the state, so we bring in 200 or 300 agents a year in our organization through that. So we're ramping that up more and more to be more online and more virtual to take a bigger piece of that pie. But there'll be those acquisitions and all. But I think long term for us, I mean, we're going in our 4th generation. So, and I would say that you can say that we had a great strategic plan back in 1929 of my grandfather going forward. It really, with more than anything else, luckily, our father, his son came into play because he would have screwed things up if there was another generation to save him, because that's what happens. And my father would have screwed things up if my brother and I have come along. And Stuart and I are just thankful our kids are there because we're going to screw things up if they don't come along and save us. Because that's if we everyone's got their advantage. What makes them different? What's their competitive advantage? And for us, it's that ability to shift and go generate and have each generation change the company to what needs to be. And that's we're 90 years old, but in reality, we're probably one of the youngest brokers in our market because we're in our 4th generation. They see the world differently and driving change. So that's more longer than next year, but get that in place now as we grow forward.
It's funny. I just talked to OB Jacoby at Windermere about this very thing, because he's got nieces and nephews now entering the business and kids entering the business and that. And, he said the same thing. We were joking. It's like Succession, the show Successions. He said maybe not that bad, but
we're not quite that cutthroat. And we don't have the private jets either.
No, exactly. No helicopters and
PJs. Yes, they say. Yeah.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for joining the RealTrending podcast. We really appreciate your insights on the industry.